Hello and welcome into the RotoWire Esports Show. I'm Andrew Laird, joined as always by Ethan Sexton today to talk about our last two-game LCK slate before China comes back with the LPL. Ethan, I was looking at this tournament that I entered for this morning's slate, which went basically almost exactly how we would have expected. Like Genji sweeps, Damwon gets a 2-1 over HLE. Maybe that one could have been a sweep, but like it couldn't have gone any more to script, I think, from what many were expecting to happen. So in this tournament that I'm entered, there was a solo first, which
Really?
I thought was incredible. There was a solo second, and then there was an 18-way tie for third and a 40-way tie for fourth.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like the top prize just in this one I'm looking at was $150. If you had the fourth highest scoring lineup, you made $4.88.
Yeah. I mean, today was a regular old chalk fest, right? So yeah,
Well,
the tournament I was in was I think it was like a 6 or an 8-way tie for first, and people made like pennies of what they should have, you know. So it was a rough one in that regard for sure.
yeah. So I think what is at least I think you can learn a lesson from this slate though, because there was a solo first, there was a solo
Yep.
second. The lineup that won this one was a Damwon long stack, but a Clid captain. So you had basically your captain, your mid laner, and the team slot as your short stack, which is like when you have two series that kind of play out like this, the favorites win. Obviously, the combinations are important, but it's almost like you should just look at all the puzzle pieces and be like, what are the different ways that I can get these pieces together? Like having to get your captain in the long stack, like on a slate like this, where we're like two series that were fairly, or one we knew was not going to be close, and the other one would be. I think they played it perfectly. Bravo to Cuz 100. That's it.
Woman. Oh, yeah.
That's what it is.
Can you hear me, Andrew? I think my Skype froze for a
Oh,
second. I'm sorry, man.
yeah, you're good now. Don't worry.
I just said shout out to Cuz 100.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's all.
Hopefully a watcher. If so, good job. All right, so our last two games LCK slate. I don't want to get like so fired up about these two game slates ending because we get two game slates for LPL on Monday and Tuesday, but we'll cross. At
Right.
least those should be more exciting situations. But we've got T1. Speaking of exciting, T1 fairly decent favorite against Sandbox, and then DRX favorite against Afrika. I don't ever want to play T1 for mostly lineup reasons. Like I just don't. I'm not somebody who plays enough to warrant waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning to make sure that that my starters are in.
Right.
It also doesn't even matter on this slate because T1's in the late game. Like late game T1 is about the worst thing you could ever ask for when it comes to an LCK slate.
Yeah, for sure. Late game T1 coming off a loss.
Yeah, right.
It's like the holy triumvirate there. Like man, it's like Rush, but the band Rush. You know, three guys, three. I don't know where I'm going with this. Never mind. It's like the opposite of the band Rush. The
Yes.
three things that you don't want to see, I guess, is I don't know.
There you
terrible.
go.
But these LCK slates have fried my brain, obviously. Yeah, I don't. T1 is like. This is the riskiest proposition ever because we have no clue who's going to play, and we're not going to know until after lineup lock. And even so, you know, even if somebody told you who the starters were, would we feel that confident in them anyway? Because they've been crap this year. I mean, at least by their lofty standards, you know, they're sitting down there in sixth place when coming into the season, I think most people expected them to be a team that would fight for the title, and it just has not been the case at all.
Yeah.
So for me, I think this is Sandbox's last hurrah, man. I'm probably going to play Sandbox, and if they lose, I'm going to never talk about them again except to say, hey, they're on the slate and they suck. I'm going into this I don't really expect them to win, right? But this is their last chance to do something. and their lineup is a little screwy. They made some changes after their first series this week, so they got rid of both their 80 carries. So both Route and Leo are gone, which is good in a sense because now we don't have to play a guessing game between those two as to who's starting. So they got this guy Prince, who I believe was on FPX's academy team. So he moved over a couple weeks ago. He moved over, and they're giving him the role. I mean, he's the only 80 carry currently on the roster. So yeah, he's gonna come in and start. It looks like he's gonna for sure start tomorrow. And then they're bringing back on Fleek. They activated him. He's been inactive after he had some off-season. I think he did something toxic. I can't remember exactly, but he basically got a suspension, and they made him inactive for the first part of the season. But they activated him this week. We don't know for sure that he's going to start because Krako there is still on the roster. Yep. They didn't make him inactive like they did with their 280 carries. So we don't know for sure that he's going to start, but I'm going to assume that he starts because he was actually one of their better players last year, and he's a pretty solid jungler. He finished fourth in kills among all junglers last year in the summer split 2020 for the LCK, and then he actually finished with I believe the best kill participation among all junglers in the league last year, all full-time junglers. Anyway, there's a couple guys ahead of him, but they only played 2 games or 12 games. So in 42 games last year, he had over 72.5 with his kill participation. So he's actually a pretty solid player. Arguably their best player last year. He wasn't their main carry threat, but just all around, I think he was one of their best players. So I'm going to assume that he starts, but we're not going to know, unfortunately, because it's a late game. But I'm going to assume he's going to get the start tomorrow. Does it provide enough juice for them to beat T1? I can't say that with any certainty because they've been – I mean, we're talking about T1 being awful, but SANDBOX are record-wise the worst team in the league and have been literally awful, I guess, is what we can say about them. But 2-game slate, man, T1 nonsense. Do you really want to play them? And then the lineup comes out and you've got 3 guys that aren't even starting. Maybe this is the last chance to really take a shot with this SANDBOX team for an upset here.
Not to blatantly call you out, even though I'm clearly going to blatantly call you out. I think other than bringing up Fred at Brion on every video, anytime SANDBOX is on the slate, I think you say you do like this SANDBOX lineup.
Yep.
So
and it hasn't really worked out in my favor at all. I mean, I like the lineup. I feel like they should be a lot better than they are, and I'm not saying that they should be in first place in the league or anything, but really expected them to be fighting for a playoff spot, and they've been horrible and to my detriment mostly. But yeah, I mean, I talk about it on every slate, and it just hasn't panned out that way. I mean, this team once upon a time was lauded as one of the best up and coming teams in the world alongside Damwon. They came into the league at the same time, similar time to when Griffin came in, if I'm getting my timeline right. And those 3 teams, the year that they weren't in the LCK yet, they were still in the challenger scene. Worlds was in Korea that year, and some of the teams from other regions were scrimming SANDBOX and Damwon and Griffin and just saying that they were incredible and all this stuff. So this roster has talent, but they're just not performing at all this year.
I can't decide if I'm on board with SANDBOX because I'm so anti T1 lineup. I think if I knew the T1 lineup, I'd feel better. But
right,
it's and like you said, coming off a loss, it just makes it even worse. So if you play SANDBOX, you can play either team from the other series.
Yep.
DRX slightly favored. I had no hesitation to start building lineups with DRX, which sounds weird actually coming out of my mouth. But we've seen, I mean, they're obviously coming off they beat T1 in it was T1, right? The last time. Yeah.
Yep.
So DRX SANDBOX, how do you go wrong?
There's plenty of ways to go wrong with that, of course. We know that, right? But Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, DRX coming off the 2-1 over T1, and they're still kind of an up and down type of team,
Yeah.
so they could certainly drop this series, but I'm going to favor them here. As much as I've said I like this sandbox roster, and I've said that a lot this year, I don't like Afrika's roster still, and I just don't think Afrika are that good of a team. So I'm going to expect that DRX can come away with a win here tomorrow. You know, it's not like the safest thing in the world, I guess. They're not like smashing everybody they play or anything like that. So there's definitely some room for caution there. But I certainly like them going into that series, and it's mostly just I don't rate Afrika very highly. So yeah, I mean I'm with you on the DRX front for sure.
I mean, so DRX got swept by Damwon before they beat T1. But they beat Genji before that. So literally their last three, 2-1 win over Genji, swept by Damwon, 2-1 win over T1. I mean, we've played this like opponent game before. That seems pretty good to me.
Yep,
Simple as that.
I think DRX are kind of they could potentially beat anyone on a given day, but they could also potentially lose to anyone on a given day. And it's kind of just a product of they've got three rookies, three out of the four players on the team are rookies, so there's some bumps in the road there. But their young players have played pretty well, and then Piosik is a guy we really like as a jungler,
Yeah.
and as a carry threat in the jungle. So they have a nice little lineup going, and the more experience with these rookies, the better. And I just think they're a better team than Afrika at this point in the season for sure. Afrika's got, I mean, I talk about it before, but like Fly and Bang are just like. They're on the downslope of their career. They're kind of washed up. They can show up from time to time, but they're just not in the primes of their career anymore. So I just think this DRX lineup's a bit better top to bottom, in my opinion.
So Afrika have 3 wins this season. They swept Fred at Brion. They swept Red Force. And then they also swept T1.
Yeah, well, T1, it's like give a little, take a little, I guess. I don't know. T1 are like the most confusing team anywhere this year, I think, with how bad they've played and sometimes how good they've played in series, and then with the 10-man roster just causing so much confusion. It's they're just awful to try to get a handle on, really.
Do you think we're better off with like a Piosik captain? Like do double jungle instead of the double carries, just because the carries kind of have some question marks in terms of like we haven't seen Prince play in the LCK yet. What are your thoughts on that?
I think double jungle is viable. I think you could get away with a Bow captain, and then take a shot on Prince just in your lineup maybe. I think Bow has like the 4th or 5th most kills in the league, and he's kind of like what we talked about with Yakdam yesterday. I think he has by far the most kills on their team. It's almost exactly the same as I look here. He's got 103 kills, and then their next closest is Piosik with 55, which is like almost exactly what we said for Red Force yesterday, I think, honestly. Piosik is definitely a guy who can carry, and he pulls out Kindred a lot and can carry on it, pick up a lot of kills, but it's hard to argue with a guy who has almost double his kills when you can fit him into the captain spot if you're going with a DRX sandbox lineup. So I think I'd still go with the AD carry in that regard. If you're playing more of a DRX T1, I think Piosik becomes way more of a viable captain option because he's going to play.
Right.
He's going to play the entirety of the series, where T1 has Elim, who's played a lot, Cuz has played a little, and then they have this guy Owner. I think I'm saying it right. He hasn't played at all this year, but he's a hyped up prospect. I think he was a guy who used to rank 1 on the Korean solo queue ladder. So maybe we see him tomorrow because T1 have been so bad. That's just such a crapshoot. The downside there, of course, if you play DRX T1 and you go with a Piosik captain, you got to pick one of those guys, but I wouldn't captain one of them. That's just adding to the risk that's already pretty abundant.
Who do you think is the most stable T1 starter?
Oh, God. Carrier.
Yeah.
He's the only support on the roster. He's the only support in the player pool, so got to say him. He's played every game, whereas they've changed in literally every other position based on how they feel. I mean, the frustrating thing with them is it's like they'll do lineup changes off of wins.
Right.
So it's just there hasn't been any consistency. So Carrier is the only one who's played every single game. He's going to start for sure. He's their only support. But then it's like he's their support. Like you're not going to captain him probably. So
Right. I'm just thinking like if you like a T1 short stack, Carrier, the team slot, those are starting.
Yep.
And then you just got to hope for the best on. I guess it depends on who you captain because at that point,
basically be the whatever role that you play the captain from the other team that you're playing, right? So if it's jungle, you got to fight between 3 guys there. If it's mid lane, you got to fight between faker and closer. If it's AD carry, I mean, it's just frustrating, man. That 10-man roster or 9-man roster just doesn't make it easy for us.
Oh, I just wish it. I mean, obviously, like complaining about it doesn't do anything, but like I don't think I can have like a reasonable opinion on how they'll do in the matchup because I'm too concerned about who's playing, and not because it matters to me who plays in terms of winning. I just I don't want to have a 0.
Right.
That's
right.
All.
It's just
I'd like
not
to avoid a 0.
Yeah, exactly, man. It's a tough one tomorrow with T1. I mean, if you're playing them, send up a prayer before you go to bed. Or, because you can't even get up early and check.
Right.
So it's really going to be a tough one tomorrow with them for sure.
That's
why I'm saying all in sandbox. I mean,
what could go wrong?
I love the roster, right?
Yeah.
So got to back them up here. Got to one last hurrah with them, and then never play them again. I guess if they lose, but
we got to go.
To me, it's just like the whole T1 thing, man. It's like, do I really want to mess around and try to predict who's going to play, or do I want to just try to get some leverage while knowing the starters for Sandbox and then knowing the starters for DRX? I guess that's kind of where I'm landing because it at least takes the frustration of, I had T1 and they swept, but, 2 of my players didn't play. So it's going to be, I don't know. At least you get a little peace of mind when you're setting your lineups.
Right.
You may not get it when you look at your lineup after the slate.
Process over result, Ethan. Always.
There you go.
If you guys have enjoyed the video, if you could please hit the like button below. Feel free to subscribe for all the RotoWire videos. You can also get notified for every time the new one comes up with that little bell below, so feel free to check that out. If you'd like to try out a RotoWire subscription for 10 days, no credit card required, just go to rotowire.com/pod. That's POD. That gets you access to the entire site as well as our Discord chat, which is open for all subscribers and includes conversations about all the sports we cover, including League of Legends. So, Ethan, thank you for that, and good luck on the last day of 2-game LCK slates.
Yes, looking forward to the LPL coming back, man.